Liam moved into the building in late September, the kind of cheap, aging apartment complex college students end up in when they move out too early and do the math too late. It was 3 stories tall, all beige brick and narrow hallways that smelled faintly of dust and someone else's cooking. His unit, 3A, sat at the far end of the 3rd floor, right across from 3B. 3B was empty when he signed the lease. The landlord mentioned, almost casually, that someone would be moving in soon. A quiet guy, he said. Single, no pets, no smoking. Exactly the kind of neighbor you want. For the first few weeks, Liam barely thought about it. He was busy with classes, a part-time job, and figuring out how long he could stretch instant noodles before his body gave up. The building was old, but predictable. Pipes rattled at random. The elevator groaned like it hated every button press. Doors slammed, couples argued, kids ran down the hallway. Nothing unusual. Then one night, around 3 a.m, he heard footsteps in the hall. He was awake, scrolling on his phone in the dark, the pale light turning his hands grey. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps past his door, then faded toward the stairwell. He checked the time. 3:07 He didn't think much of it. People came and went at weird hours. It was a college town. The next night, it happened again. Same slow steps, same direction, same time. By the end of the week, it was a pattern. Every night, somewhere between 3:05 and 3:10, someone would walk past his door and head toward the stairs. Liam started waiting for it, listening. The more he listened, the more he noticed. Whoever it was never came down the hall earlier in the evening. Never in the afternoon. Never in the morning. Only after 3. One night, curiosity got the better of him. He turned off his bedroom light a few minutes before 3 and walked quietly to the front door. He pressed his eye to the peephole and waited. At 3:08, the door across the hall opened. A man stepped out. Medium height, a little too thin under an oversized dark hoodie. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, the brim shadowing his face, and carried a black duffel bag in one hand. He moved like someone trying not to make noise, walking on the balls of his feet, pausing to lock his door with exaggerated care. Liam watched him glance up and down the hallway, then head toward the stairs. He had never seen this man during the day, not once. Considering he lived directly opposite him, that felt off. The next morning, Liam asked the landlord casually if the new neighbor had a night shift. "Does he?" the landlord replied. "No idea. Signed the lease online. Key pickup from the lockbox. I barely met him." Something about that answer stuck with him. You usually met your tenants. You usually at least knew what they looked like. Over the next couple of weeks, Liam tried to catch the neighbor during normal hours. He listened for movement, doors opening, anything. During the day, 3B was silent. Blinds drawn tight. No music, no TV, no conversation. Packages appeared by the door and stayed there until the middle of the night, when they would suddenly vanish between one moment and the next. The only proof anyone lived there were those 3:00 walks. Sometimes the man carried the duffel bag. Sometimes it was a backpack. Once, he clutched a stack of grocery bags so full their handles cut into his fingers. He always wore long sleeves, even when the weather was warm. Always kept his head down. Liam told himself it was none of his business. He had exams, a job, responsibilities. People worked night shifts all the time. But curiosity doesn't listen to logic, and fear listens even less. It got worse when the flyers started appearing. The first one was taped to the front entrance door. A missing woman in her late 20s, dark hair, last seen leaving a bar 2 miles away. The picture showed her smiling, teeth bright, eyes catching the flash. The date on the flyer was from a week earlier. Liam stared at it for a long time before going upstairs. That night, he woke up with his heart pounding and the sense that he'd heard something unusual. It wasn't the usual footsteps. This time, he heard something dragging, a dull, uneven scrape along the faded hallway carpet. A soft thud, then the same slow, careful steps. He checked his phone. 3:11 He lay there frozen, listening until the sound faded. The next morning, there was a faint dark smear on the carpet between his door and 3B. It was small enough to ignore, small enough that anyone else would step over it without noticing. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. He pretended it was spilled coffee, or mud, or anything else. That afternoon, his friend Marcus came over to hang out and complain about their professors. While they were waiting for a delivery, Liam brought up the neighbor. "So he only comes out after 3? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "Dude, that's not a night shift. That's vampire behavior." "Shut up," Liam said. "I'm serious. I've never seen him in daylight. Maybe he's just private. Private doesn't explain the dragging noise." Marcus leaned back, grinning in the way people do when something scares them a little, but they don't want to admit it. "Okay, next time he goes out, follow him." Liam stared at him. "And what? Ask if he's murdering people?" "You don't have to talk to him," Marcus said. "Just see where he goes. If he just walks to work or buys cigarettes at the gas station, you can stop freaking out. If he goes into the woods with a shovel and a tarp..." He let the sentence trail off. Liam laughed, but it came out thinner than he'd hoped. He spent the rest of the evening trying to decide whether following a stranger at 3:00 made him brave, stupid, or both. He ended up doing it anyway. He stayed up late, sitting on the floor with his ear close to the bottom of the door, peephole already covered by a piece of tape so it wouldn't glint in the hallway. Around 3, his heartbeat picked up, that instinctive dread that comes when you know something is about to happen. At 3:06, the lock across the hall clicked. He peeled the tape back from the peephole and watched. The door to 3B opened. The neighbor stepped out in the same hoodie, same cap, same black duffel bag. Tonight, the bag looked heavier. He locked the door, checked it twice, then turned toward the stairs. As soon as his footsteps began to fade, Liam grabbed his keys and phone, slipped into his sneakers, and eased his own door open. The hallway was empty. He followed, keeping far enough back that he couldn't see the man, only hear him. The stairwell echoed every footstep. Liam moved slowly, stepping near the wall where the boards creaked the least. By the time he reached the ground floor, the entrance door was just swinging shut. Liam hurried forward and stepped outside. The night was cold, the sky a deep, cloudy black that swallowed the streetlights. The neighborhood was mostly asleep. A few windows glowed from televisions, but the street itself was empty. The neighbor was already halfway down the block, walking with that same strange, deliberate pace, duffel bag hanging from his shoulder. Liam shoved his hood up and followed at a distance. They walked for several blocks, past closed storefronts and dark houses, past the bus stop where Liam usually cut through during the day. Every so often, the man would glance over his shoulder, but never long enough to spot him. Finally, the neighbor turned down a side street Liam barely knew existed. It led to a cluster of run-down industrial buildings on the edge of the neighborhood. Old warehouses, a shuttered auto shop, a former dentist office with its windows boarded up. The man headed straight for the old dentist office. There was a side door, partially hidden in shadow. The neighbor looked around once, then produced a key and slipped inside. The door shut behind him with a dull, heavy thud. Liam stood across the street, his breath forming shaky clouds in the air. He could turn around now, go home, pretend he never saw any of this. All he had, technically, was a creepy guy with bad hours and questionable taste in real estate. He stayed where he was. Minutes passed. 5, 10. No movement from the building. No light in the upper windows. No sign of a car pulling up. Eventually, the door opened again. The neighbor stepped out, this time without the duffel bag. His shoulders looked looser, lighter. He locked the door quickly and started back the way he'd come. Liam pressed himself into the doorway of a nearby building, heart racing as the man passed. Up close, he caught a whiff of something sharp and chemical, like cleaning supplies and something metallic underneath. The man's skin, where it peeked out from under the hoodie, looked oddly pale, almost grey in the worn streetlight. His eyes, when they flicked in Liam's direction, were flat and tired. There was no spark of recognition, no hello, no nod, just a brief sweep over him, like another piece of scenery. Liam waited until he was gone, then stared at the dentist office door. He didn't go inside. He wasn't that stupid. But from that night on, every time he heard those footsteps at 3 a.m, he pictured that door and the missing duffel bag, and he wondered what was being taken in and what was being brought out. The tension slowly wore him down. He started sleeping lighter, waking up at the smallest sounds. He had nightmares about the hallway outside his door, about opening it and finding the neighbor standing there, hand raised to knock. 2 weeks later, a second missing person flyer appeared in the lobby. Different woman, different part of town, similar age, similar smile. Liam felt something in his stomach twist. He thought about calling the police then, but what would he say? My neighbor walks weird and goes into empty buildings at night. Was not exactly a solid report. He tried telling himself he was being paranoid. He tried not to stare at 3B whenever he left his apartment. He tried focusing on school. Then came the night that forced his hand. It was a Tuesday. Rain was pattering lightly against the windows, the kind of quiet storm that made the city feel smaller. Liam was half asleep, his phone face down on his pillow, when he heard something that didn't fit. Not footsteps, a muffled cry. It was faint, almost swallowed by the sound of the rain, but unmistakable. A choked, desperate sound from somewhere close. He sat up in bed, heart already pounding, listening hard. There it was again, louder this time. A strangled, panicked sob. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway. He grabbed his phone and went to the door, pressing his ear against it. He could hear movement now. Heavy, hurried footsteps. A thump against the wall. Then a voice, low and angry, hissing through clenched teeth. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was vicious. Something crashed. Glass, maybe. The sobbing cut off abruptly, replaced by a whimper. He backed away from the door, trembling. For a few seconds, he just stood there, phone in his hand, brain buzzing with indecision. Call the police and risk being wrong. Stay quiet and risk being too late. He dialed. The operator's voice was calm, rehearsed. She asked for his address, then for details. He stumbled over his words, trying to explain the noises, the patterns, the late-night walks. He could hear the skepticism even as she assured him they'd send a car to check it out. When he hung up, the hallway had gone silent. The footsteps had stopped. No more crashes, no more voices. He knew the response time in his neighborhood. 10, maybe 15 minutes. Anything that was happening would be over long before then. Against every instinct screaming at him to stay put, he unlocked his door. The hallway was dim, lit only by the emergency lights. The air felt heavier than usual, as if it was holding its breath. The door to 3B was slightly open, only an inch, maybe two, just enough to show the dark line of the interior. He should have waited for the police, he knew that. But fear and adrenaline make people reckless in ways they never imagine. He stepped into the hall and crossed the warm carpet. Each footstep sounded too loud. When he reached 3B, he pushed the door open with the tips of his fingers. The smell hit him first. Bleach, almost overpowering, undercut by something sour and organic. The kind of smell you feel in your eyes before your nose catches up. The living room was mostly empty. Plastic sheeting covered part of the floor near the far wall. A metal folding chair stood in the middle of the room, its legs leaving faint impressions in the plastic. There were ropes on the floor, dark stains in the grooves of the chair's seat. He swallowed hard and forced himself to keep moving. From somewhere deeper in the apartment, he heard it. A weak, desperate tapping. 3 quick knocks, then a pause, then 3 more. He followed the sound down the narrow hallway, phone light shaking in his hand. The tapping grew louder as he approached the last door on the right. "Hello," he whispered. The tapping stopped, then resumed with frantic urgency. He tried the doorknob. It was locked. "Hey," he said louder this time. "Police are coming, okay? Just hang on." As soon as the word police left his mouth, another sound cut through the apartment, the front door closing. Liam froze, every muscle going tight. He turned slowly. The neighbor stood at the end of the hallway. Up close, under the harsh overhead light, he looked less like a shadow and more like a real person. Mid-30s, pale, gaunt face, dark eyes that hadn't seen much sleep. His hoodie was damp from the rain, clinging to his shoulders. In one hand, he held a set of keys. In the other, a roll of duct tape. For a few long seconds, neither of them spoke. Then the neighbor smiled. It was a small, controlled expression. Not friendly, not angry, just assessing. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. Liam's throat was dry. "Someone's in that room," he managed. "I heard them. I called the police." The smile didn't fade, but something in the man's eyes sharpened. "Did you?" he asked. "That was a mistake." He took one step forward. The hallway suddenly felt too narrow. "You don't understand," the man continued, voice still soft. "She's sick. She hurts herself. I'm trying to help her. People don't always understand that kind of thing." Another step. The duct tape crinkled in his hand. Liam backed up until he felt the locked door press against his shoulder blades. "She screamed," Liam said. "That didn't sound like someone being helped." The man's gaze flicked toward the door. For the first time, a crack showed in his calm. "She panics," he said. "She says things. You can't trust what she says." Liam's phone buzzed in his palm. A text. He didn't dare look at it. He realized very suddenly that if the man rushed him, there was nowhere to go. No window to climb out of. No second exit. The neighbor seemed to come to the same conclusion. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "Look," he said, taking another step. "You're young. You think you're doing the right thing. I get it. Why don't you leave now and we pretend this didn't happen? I'll tell the officers you misheard. You were stressed. They'll believe me." The casual certainty in his voice made Liam's skin crawl. From behind the door, faint and shaky, came a hoarse whisper. "Don't leave." The neighbor's face changed. The expression dropped like a mask being ripped away, replaced by something cold and vicious. He lunged. Liam threw himself sideways, his shoulder slamming into the wall as the man crashed into the locked door. The impact rattled the frame, but the lock held. Liam bolted past him, sprinting down the hallway toward the living room. He heard the neighbor curse, then the rapid slap of footsteps following. He didn't look back. He veered around the plastic-covered floor, heading for the front door. But the man was faster than he looked. A hand clamped down on the back of Liam's hoodie, yanking him backward. He stumbled, hitting the floor hard, phone skittering away. The neighbor was on him in an instant, forearm pressing against his throat. "You should have stayed in your apartment," he hissed. His breath smelled like stale coffee and metal. No one would have believed her. No one ever does. Liam clawed at his arm, vision starting to blur. Then sirens wailed outside. The sound hit the room like a physical shock. The neighbor's grip faltered just enough for Liam to twist loose. He rolled away, coughing, and scrambled toward the front door. Heavy boots pounded up the stairwell. Voices shouted. Someone tried the doorknob and found it locked. "Police, open the door." The neighbor stood in the middle of the room, chest heaving, eyes darting between Liam and the door. For a moment, Liam thought he might try to finish what he'd started anyway. Instead, the man did something far stranger. He dropped the duct tape, ran his hands through his hair, and then deliberately kicked Liam in the side, sending him sprawling near the plastic-covered floor. When the police forced the door open seconds later, they found Liam on the ground, gasping, and the neighbor standing over him with his hands raised. "Thank God," the man said, voice suddenly shaking. "He broke into my apartment. I think he's on something. He tried to get into my locked room." The officers moved fast. Two of them grabbed Liam, hauling him away from the plastic. Another approached the neighbor, asking quick, clipped questions. Liam tried to speak, but it came out as a croak. His head spun. For a terrifying moment, he realized the neighbor had just rewritten the entire scene in a single sentence. Then, faint but insistent, came that tapping again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. One of the officers turned toward the hallway. "What's that?" The neighbor froze. "Plumbing," he said quickly. "This building is old. Everything makes noise." The tapping continued, louder now, desperate. "Hello?" a broken voice called. "Please, please, is someone there?" The room went still. The officer who'd been questioning the neighbor stared at him for a long, hard second, then pushed past him and headed down the hall. The others followed, dragging Liam with them. They stopped outside the locked door. "Mom?" the officer called. "Are you injured?" A sob of relief answered him. The neighbor lunged, panic finally breaking through. "She's unstable," he said. "You can't open that door. She'll hurt herself. She'll hurt you." No one listened. They kicked the door in. The woman inside was thinner than her missing poster, eyes sunken, wrists bruised where ropes had bitten into them. She squinted against the light, then started crying when she saw the uniforms. "He took me," she whispered. "Please, please don't let him take me again." The rest of the night blurred into questions, statements, flashing lights, and the surreal sight of the neighbor being led out in handcuffs, his face finally stripped of calm. Later, much later, after the building had been partially emptied and crime scene tape had become part of the hallway decor, the landlord told Liam something the news never mentioned. When the city finally cleared the apartment, contractors came in to start repairs. They knocked down a section of the wall in 3B to deal with water damage. Behind the drywall, they found a narrow crawl space running the length of the unit. Inside, there were old blankets, empty food containers, scraps of duct tape, and one more thing. A small hole drilled straight through the shared wall. It faced 3A, right at Liam's bedroom. For weeks after that, he lay awake at night, staring at the dark spot where his poster now covered the wall, and tried not to imagine an eye pressed against it while he slept. The narrator who told Liam's story likes to end it with something simple. Trust the feeling that something is wrong. If your new neighbor only comes out after 3A.M, there is a reason for it, and you better hope that reason has nothing to do with you.